Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Season 2 of the Planning Commission podcast is underway. Can we believe? I can't even believe I'm saying season 2. The three of us.
We renewed ourselves, right? we decided it was successful enough to give ourselves an offer.
Yes, that's true. We convinced ourselves things were going just splendidly and decided to continue to keep on trucking, right? So, commissioners, roll call. Who's in the commission? Commissioner Kostelik, present?
Present.
Commissioner Smith?
Present.
And so am I, Commissioner Danley. Awesome to see you good, familiar faces. We were recharged, ready to rock. Lots of good guests coming up for this year. Man, cannot wait. And we're going to kick things off with a fantastic guest today who, holy cow, I mean, we've gone on this ascent, right? From the beginning of our education as planners to planner 1, planner 2, up to director. Well, hey, I got a whole new title for you this time, and we'll get to that in just a second. But let's talk about the title. All right, I worked on this one, and I need your patience because it's going to take me a second to introduce. It's a little longer than I typically go, but given the gravity of the subject and the person, I think it fits really well, and you might recognize it. Okay, ready? So here's the title of today's episode. I want to wake up in a DOT that never sleeps and find I'm a number 1, top of the list, king of the hill. A number 1. I know it's a great singing voice.
Keep your day job.
Now, when I read the lyrics to that song, I didn't realize. Did you all realize that he says A number 1 twice? It's the chairman of the board, right? Frank Sinatra. Our guest today is that person, A number 1, king of the hill, top of the heap. And we're going to get to that person and their title and everything as to why in just a minute. But the first thing I want to do is ask ourselves a question. If you could be the secretary of anything in this country, what would you be the secretary of and why? Commissioner Kostelik, I think you might be ready for this question. Hit me.
I would be the secretary of sweet iced tea protocols because, I mean, there's parts of the South, Bojangles, that kind of get it, but you try to get sweet tea anywhere else, and it's like, no, you are doing it wrong. First of all, you got to make it fresh every day. If you put it in the cooler overnight, it gets sour. After you steep it and it's still warm and you're diluting it, you can't do it with fast water because more foam creates bitter. And I mean, restaurants just get it wrong all the time. So if I could redo myself, I'd be the secretary of that and start that consulting gig.
The secretary of sweet tea. Of all the things that you could have selected, that's what you're going to hang your hat on. Okay.
Yeah. Baseball's long gone, so nothing you can do there. So
everybody's got their hill they got to die on, man, and yours is sweet tea. Okay.
Pick a place I can have success.
All right. Jess, secretary of what?
I want to be, this is a little bit more serious. Gee, I thought we were supposed to come prepared. I want to be the secretary of people problems. And I know that sounds like a lot of weirdness, but before there were human resources, didn't we just like help people with whatever their problem was? Like if you were running a company and somebody came to you and said, this is the issue. And then of course there were like problems with labor laws and things and all of those sort of civil rights that came along later. But I think at this point in the world, what I'd like to do is have this kind of open door, like there are no stupid questions. Come and ask me your people problem. And I'm very well qualified because I've been a person my whole life. And and I do love questions. So I would really like to hear like what's going on. And when we first started this podcast, we were talking about like all the things we want to talk about. And I get more and more interested in, no matter what kind of work you're doing, what's your problem? What keeps you up at night? What's your hot button pain points? And a lot of times those have nothing to do with technical issues. It has more to do with, well, I don't think I'm paid enough, or, well, I'm bored, or I'm tired, or like I feel like I'm a hamster in this.
Oh, now if you knew the
planning
people
wheel.
problem stuff Chris came to HR with when he was working under me in our
True.
public
Yeah,
agency,
yeah.
It was because you took away his coffee pot, and that was just, I think that was
that was
bad
just the
bossing.
start of it.
Don't like it.
Um,
So that's what I want.
you know-
The secretary of people problems.
I'm going to sound like the get off my lawn guy at this point in time, but you can tell which of the three of us is a millennial, can't you? I mean,
You know what? They keep pulling back that date. You guys might be in it before you know it.
and the reason I say that is because, you know, your claim about there's no stupid questions. Oh my gosh, do I disagree
come
on
on.
that? There's definitely stupid questions.
Which you see in what role as planning and
Oh,
zoning
yeah,
commission?
well, yeah, I got to be careful in what I say and how I describe that, but yes, indeed. So I'm
Fine.
gonna go my secretary, and we've alluded to this in season 1, but I figure let's just jump into the pool. I'm gonna be the Secretary of America's Restaurants, because it's time to do some purging.
Who are you getting rid of first?
Well, this guy has created food laws that govern where he eats when he's on the road. And Dawn is familiar with some of those food laws. I won't go into every one of them, but I'll give you a little sample. The first food law is never eat at a restaurant with the word golden in the title. Because if you do, you know, absolutely everything is deep fried to oblivion. And that's just
Even
not
down to
how
the
I
salt
roll.
and pepper shakers. They're just
That's right.
sitting there
That's
deep
right.
fried.
So, and I'll give you number 2 is never eat a restaurant with something in the title that refers to harnessing some sort of an animal, like a barn, a sty, a corral. I am not a horse. I'm not a cow. I am not a pig. I am a human being that wants good food. So yes, Golden Corral, sorry, you're out. You're hitting the bricks.
There goes
So-
that sponsorship deal.
I'm totally okay with that. Nobody should eat open flowing chocolate sauce that collects human dust.
What about the
So,
children? What about the
No,
children?
yeah,
my
there-
favorite. Oh, okay.
whole other issue. All right, let's move forward. Our whiskey pairing, Dawn, our first whiskey pairing of season number 2. What's it going to be? Hit us.
First whiskey pairing of the year. Our guest today, and you haven't mentioned who it is, so should I?
have
or
it.
is that
That's
kind of
no.
okay? All right,
We'll
all
get
right.
there. We'll get there.
All right, all right. Our guest today is definitely a rare breed when it comes to
good
the
call.
state
Good
DOT
call.
and engineering side of things. I can't get the glare off that. So I've got a wild turkey rare breed rye, barrel proof here. Actually, the first Kentucky distillery I ever visited as I was going up to visit colleges my senior year of high school. But yes, wild turkey rare breed.
And there's lots of wild turkey, particularly, I think, more on the eastern half of the state of which this person oversees, maybe in the west side too, but I know for sure in the east side. So I think it's pretty germane and accurate. Awesome. Well, it's time for us to unveil our guest. And man, we're so excited. It's been a little bit long time in the making. We had some scheduling issues and such, but we're here now. And actually, I think it might even be more advantageous because our guest has yet another role that is now national, and we're excited that he'll get a chance to share with our audience what that role is, and it's an important one. Our guest today, Washington Department of Transportation, the Secretary of Transportation, I think that's the official title. I probably butchered it, but he'll correct us, is Roger Millar. Roger, thank you so much for joining us on our inaugural season or episode of season number 2. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, Happy New Year. Happy to be here.
Great. So let's just start off with your background. Give us a little bit about you, because we have known you for a while. We know your roots here in Idaho and some other states and your general ascension to where you are now. But if you can share with our audience just that background for us.
Sure. In a minute or two, I'm an Army brat.
There you go.
I'm an Army brat, and that kind of defines my worldview. I was born in Virginia, lived at Fort Belvoir 3 times before I was 5, but I went to 15 schools in 12 years and wound up graduating from Stuttgart American High School in Stuttgart, Germany. I lived on a hilltop between the Mercedes factory and the Porsche factory. And
Wow.
from Stuttgart, I was able to go anywhere in Europe and had the opportunity to do that. Came back from Europe, went to the University of Virginia, started as an international relations major and switched to civil engineering after a year and a half. Graduated, threw everything I had in the back of my car and came out west. It was a camping trip and I brought a suit along. So I visited national parks and I looked for a job. And I wound up getting an interview from the city of Portland. And I went back to my folks' house. There was the letter, "You're welcome to an interview." I threw everything back in the car. I drove out to Portland, did the interview. I was number 3 on the civil service list. They hired the first 2. And then the council did a hiring freeze because they were in the middle of a recession. So there I was sleeping on a friend's living room floor, first on the list, hiring freeze, no money. So I told my old man, my dad, and he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll support you for 3 months. And if you don't have a job in 3 months, you get to join the branch of the military of your choice." Now,
Wow.
my degree is in civil engineering, but my specialty was water and wastewater. So the city calls 2 months and 3 weeks into this. The city
Oh
calls,
my gosh.
"Mr. Millar, we'd like to offer you a job." "Yes." "What is it?"
What is it? Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Arterial street designer. "Oh, I can do that." "Yeah, okay." And that's how I got into transportation. So I'm an engineer 1 at PDOT, which is now PBOT at the city of Portland, 1983. 1987, I'm engineer 6 and I'm managing the arterial improvements division.
Wow, we don't even get to get up to planner 6s in our
Oh man,
thing. Engineer 6, that's a
let
lot.
me tell you, yeah, engineer 6. There were 8 on the scale, going up to the city engineer. But I left public sector and went to consulting in 1990. I was, among other things, I'm kind of proud of it. I conceived of the Portland streetcar and managed its development. And I was also the project manager for the master plan for the Pearl District in Portland. Some folks from Aspen came to Portland looking for solutions to their transportation and housing problems. And I am a skier and a fly fisher, and Aspen sounded really good. So I opened an office for my firm in the Roaring Fork Valley in Western Colorado. I was invited over to give a talk, which led to a contract, which led to 2 weeks a month, and what the heck. So I moved to Carbondale, Colorado, bought a house, had 2 kids. They were both born in the hospital in Aspen. Loved the mountains, but I was tired of traveling. So I thought, well, what do I do next? I went to a multinational consulting firm. I was a vice president at AECOM and loved the work. I was working on the Lower Manhattan recovery after 9/11. I was working on the CTA work in Chicago. I was working on high-speed rail in southern US, southeastern US, but I wanted to get my kids back to the mountains. My daughter comes home from daycare. "Dad, do you know that there are people who drive an hour to go skiing?" An hour.
Poor thing.
"Oh, honey, and it's such cruddy skiing too, isn't it?" So I applied for 4 jobs and I got 2 offers. One was at Mammoth Lakes and one was at McCall.
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh my goodness.
I took the McCall job. It to me looked like a city dealing with the explosion of success that was Tamarack at the time. And so I moved my family to McCall and I was the community development director there for about 3 months. And then I became the community development director and the public works director.
Oh yeah.
2 jobs, 1 salary.
That's a bummer. Better negotiating next time.
Yeah, I managed a moratorium. I managed a rewrite of our zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance. I managed a redo of our urban renewal plan and the creation of a great big urban renewal project. I was having great fun there, but I met the mayor of Missoula, Montana, the late great John Engen, beautiful man. He passed away earlier last year. And he invited me to come to Missoula and be the city county planning director. So I went to Missoula and ran the Office of Planning and Grants, which was the city of Missoula, Missoula County, and the Missoula Metropolitan Planning Organization. I did that for 3.5 years. Met my wife. She was the planning director in Billings. It's 325 miles one way between the two.
And no high-speed rail in between.
No. 3 mountain passes, but no high-speed rail. We did the long distance thing for about 6 months, and I left the city and got a job with Smart Growth America. I was their vice president for technical assistance, and I convinced the president of SGA, it's headquartered in Washington, D.C. I said, you know, I can't provide technical assistance in small town America in a suit with a business card that says I'm from Washington, D.C. That's just not going to happen. But if I work out of my spare bedroom in Billings, and he was agreeable, and so I did that for 5.5 years. And in 5.5 years, I got to 48 states, and we provided technical assistance to cities and counties and tribes, you name it. We also started a program, is interesting. They got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, and the grant, when they submitted it, it was right before I got there. It was using DOT fiscal crisis as a lever for reform. Sounds sexy, doesn't it? But
Good.
That drew
Guys
400
falling.
people at TRB, if I recall correctly.
And so DOT fiscal crisis, because it was 2010, and there was a recession and a fiscal crisis related to that. And they got the grant, I got the job, I came on board, and I'm talking with the CEO, and I said, do you like to be reformed? I don't like to be reformed. We have to reform schools, why don't we call it the innovative DOT? And so that stuck. And I was going around from DOT to DOT trying to convince them that they needed us to help them be more innovative than they are. And the commissioner for the Tennessee DOT says, okay, I'm in, give me 10. Says, what? Says 10 innovations. I said, well, Commissioner, I got 2. No, you got to come back with 10. So, we went back, and that resulted in a book called The Innovative DOT, a handbook of policy and practice. It was quite a bit of work to put together, but it's a great document. It's been updated several times. And then I went around from state to state. I worked with Vermont, I worked with Florida, I worked with Oregon, I worked with Minnesota, I worked with Hawaii. Somebody's got to do it. And I came to Washington State, said, hey, we should really do something together. And the secretary at the time, Lynn Peterson, said, I'm looking for a deputy secretary. Come on down. So I applied, talked to my wife about it. I applied and got the job. And in October of 2015, I moved to Olympia, Washington. And the last thing I asked before I took the job was, Lynn, you're going to be around, right? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We had a little political kerfuffle, and the position I serve at the will of the governor of the state, and the governor gets to appoint his or her cabinet, and then the state senate has the option of confirming those appointments or not confirming those appointments, or specifically voting no. And if they vote no, you're done. And my boss, Jay Inslee, is a Democrat at the time. The state Senate was Republican. He appointed his entire cabinet, and the legislature took all of those appointments and tabled them in their Rules Committee. It's time for re-election. The Senate majority, how can we, maul the govs buzz? Let's take those appointments off the table and start firing them. And so my boss was first, and I was having lunch on a Friday afternoon, and Lynn called and said, they're voting on my confirmation. And I said, what's that mean? She said, you'll be gone by the end of the day. I said,
Jeez.
It was a sad day in Washington state history. It blew up in the face of the people that were doing it. Nobody else had to go through it, but my good friend, was no longer secretary, and I was acting secretary. Now, Lynn landed on her feet. She was elected the president of the Portland Metro Council. It's the only directly elected MPO governing body in the United States. She was elected by an overwhelming majority and just recently reelected by an overwhelming majority. She's doing incredibly well. But there I was, acting secretary with 4 months in state. And in August of that year, the governor appointed me secretary. In March of the following year, the Senate, still in Republican control, unanimously confirmed my appointment. And here I am.
Still here.
So I guess probably more than a minute or two, but
That's okay.
been a long,
Listen,
strange trip. Been a long,
Roger,
strange trip.
yeah, you've had a long road, and we're excited to have you here again today. And so my first question for you is, what you do at WASHDOT, what does that mean to your average community in Washington?
Oh, wow. Well, WASHDOT, we have 7,000 employees all over the state. We're in every city and county in the state of Washington. Most people see us when they're behind a snowplow, or when they get home at night, or when they look on our app or on Twitter and find out there's been a crash. They may call to grouse about litter on the highway, or homeless people camped in the right of way, or graffiti on the signs. They participate in our project development process. We're quite active, and we're quite multimodal. I mean, I am responsible for highways and bridges. I'm also responsible for the largest ferry system in the country, second largest in the world. I'm responsible for intercity passenger rail. I do grant programs with all the transit agents. The agency, we have grant programs with all the transit agencies in the state. I sit on the Sound Transit board, so citizens interact with us in terms of the Sound Transit and the investment program that's going on there. We're involved with every MPO and RTPO in the state. And so the average Washingtonian uses our system probably every day. Every once in a while, we reach out and make their lives inconvenient with a construction project. Sometimes we make it really tense for them when we are building something new in their neighborhood or rebuilding something in their neighborhood. But we are also very involved in active transportation. We spend a lot on safe routes to schools and bicycle and pedestrian programs, and increasingly we're engaged in the equity conversation, and we're very much a part of the state of Washington's commitment to fighting climate change, and that engages a lot of people as well.
Well, I know in the work and consultancy and advocacy that we do, I know from myself and Chris, when we're working with communities and even just in other states, trying to say, yes, it's okay for a state DOT to do this. I'm usually looking to find something that WASHDOT has published or said or done to help do that, because I think you guys are kind of at the front of that philosophy. And in 2018, I've always loved this and remember it. You said at the AASHTO conference in Spokane, stuff about how, housing and transportation are linked, and that lower income residents are forced into long car commutes. And that part of the congestion was the breakdown of older vehicles because people, I think you said executive housing and Walmart jobs is not the housing solution. You've known that for years, right? But I think that's something in that group of state DOTs at that level. I think I joked there had to be some confused puppy dog head tilts in that room. But how is that changing? How is that philosophy that you're invoking in that changing amongst those state highway agencies?
That's a great question. I like to say that we're not your grandmother's DOT. We're different, and it was an interesting session in Spokane. I gave the keynote speech, so I was in the article and the rest of that. But there were 4 of my colleagues there at the table who went right down the row saying ditto. We're all in the same place. You cannot build your way out of congestion. Executive housing and Walmart jobs is not jobs housing balance in these suburban communities, and on and on. By and large, the DOT community gets it. You have to remember something about my role as the Secretary of Transportation and any of my colleagues' roles, if they're a secretary or a director or commissioner or whoever. There are two things I do not do in Washington State. I do not set policy, and I do not appropriate money. That is the job of the governor and the legislature. So I am blessed to have Governor Inslee, and leadership in our state legislature. Our two chairs in the House and Senate on the transportation side are progressive and great. I mean, we have been given direction by the legislature to find ways to reduce VMT per capita. You don't see a lot of that to promote multimodalism and the like. And so I have colleagues around the country who are working with governors and legislatures of all stripes. And you have to recognize that, I can do things in Washington State that I would never be able to do in Idaho or Montana. But we as a body, you get into the equity space. After George Floyd's murder, we knew we had to do something. And so at a Western regional level, I got together with my friend Toxo Meshakin, who runs the California State Transportation Agency now, Carlos Braceras down in Utah, and James Bass, who was the director of the Texas DOT at the time. And the four of us wrote a resolution on systemic racism that we took to the Western Association board. It was adopted unanimously. And we took it from there to the AASHTO board, where it was tweaked a little bit, but it was adopted unanimously by the 52 DOTs. And it acknowledged that we had a role in the disruption, the destruction of neighborhoods, communities of color, businesses, and that activity, and we were not alone, but we were there. We were the ones building the highways. That activity had impacts that exist to this day. We acknowledged that. We committed to listen, we committed to learn, and we committed to go forward and do the right thing. Now, and we're turning that into action all around the country. The safety crisis that we're in right now, we're committed to doing something about that all around the country. The state of good repair problem we have right now with our systems, we're committed to doing something about that all around the country. And we're talking about being smart as stewards of resilient transportation systems. And we're getting into conversations about land use. We're getting into conversations about transportation demand management, transportation system management. All of that is coming from state DOTs. Some of the stuff you hear, all we're into is widening highways. The last 10 years, there was a lot of roadway expansion in the United States. The DOTs were responsible for 8% of that. The other 92% was done by other levels of government. 35 of the 52 DOTs that I work with have adopted complete streets policies. That's 2/3 of us. Do 2/3 of the cities in this country have complete streets policies? Do 2/3 of the counties in this country have complete streets? We are a different breed of cat from the folks who built the Eisenhower interstate system. But again, we're different in each of the states in response to and the direction we receive from the people who are elected to provide that direction.
So Roger, first of all, just acknowledging if my notes are accurate here, DOT, nonprofit work, city, county, MPO, private sector consulting, all of those accurate in your resume?
Yeah, I just can't hold a job, man.
I don't think I missed it. I think you've covered every possible route, in the world of planning, frankly. And it's quite a story. I wanted to get into, you're touching on this a little bit, but I'm curious, you have maybe some of your own philosophical ideas certainly WASHDOT is, and I certainly I want to, in a minute to get into your new role with AASHTO as well. So AASHTO, yet another, your smart growth background, lots of philosophical things happening there. As you're trying to implement the things that will work, I'm curious, what pushback are you getting and how are you overcoming that pushback?
The stuff I know will work, or the stuff I hope will work, or the stuff I want to try, you just have to be consistent and persistent with what you do. Culture change, and it's culture within the DOT and then culture within the community that the DOT serves. That takes time. You can't come in and, hey, I have all the solutions, let's go. As planners, that, one of the things you need to do is educate people about stuff. So when I got here in 2015, we had just passed a $15 billion transportation package connecting Washington. Everybody's like, oh, hot damn, Millar, you're getting to be secretary. They got $15 billion to spend. I said, okay, what's the value of the assets that we own? And how much are we investing in those assets? Nobody knew. We had a pavement management system, we had a bridge management system, but we didn't really have an asset management system. Surprisingly, now we do. We have an asset management system. Our system is worth $200 billion. That's what we've invested in. That's what it will cost to replace it. We should be spending $2 billion a year on it. We spend half of that. And that has consequences in terms of the quality of life of the people that live here and the rest. So we put that asset management system together, and then we took that message on the road again and again and again and again and again, that the state's economy doesn't run on the transportation infrastructure that everybody wishes they had. It runs on what we've got, and you can't take it for granted. And over the last 7.5 years, at the beginning, it was just me and my colleagues at the DOT. But now everybody's talking about it in Washington State, and it's accepted. And they just passed a new transportation package called Move Ahead Washington. And there was actually, for the first time ever, there was more money for maintenance and preservation, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and public transportation than there was for highway projects. So we just kept telling the story. A story I'm working on now is the safety story. In Washington State, the numbers are going wrong. We're a target zero state, and the numbers are going up. We had, over 700 people die on our roads last year. And there's something that everybody in Washington State knows in their heart of hearts, deep, deep, deep in their consciousness. They know that they're a good driver, and there's never going to be a crash, right? But they're always stuck in traffic. And so when you look at where we invest in response to what the public wants, the public sees this congestion problem and they want investment in that. What we've done is said, yeah, none of you are going to have a crash, but 700 families have had a tragedy in their lives, and their friends and their coworkers and the rest, and thousands have been maimed and all the damage. You add that all up, it's a $20 billion a year impact on the state's economy. Yeah. My budget's $4 billion, $20 billion a year. Congestion's impact on the economy last year was $2 billion. So do you invest in the to chase the 20, or do you invest to chase the 2? I've been telling that story for 3 or 4 years now. The governor and the legislature are committed to addressing safety in this legislative session. So you just have to recognize, I'm not the decider. I am the subject matter expert. And as planners, we're not the deciders. If you're a planning director or a member of a planning staff, you ain't the decider. You can do like my wife did and retire and become a planning commissioner, and then you kind of get to be a decider. But so
Well, I
Yeah.
think too, it's a story of bringing numbers like that and even looking at things through a different way. And then again, having to talk about it for many years to kind of get that going. I think that epitomizes, I think, the struggle we're at in a lot of states and trying to make that same case to refocus and reshift on safety.
Yeah.
And really look at it through that frame and understand it. Jess?
Yeah. The crash impact, just the crash impact nationally, it's 20 billion in Washington state. The crash impact annually last year, $1.4 trillion.
Yeah. And it's 1.45 billion here in Idaho, which we can probably guarantee you eclipse any congestion cost
Oh yeah.
for the state in the same way if we were running the numbers. So it makes sense. Jess?
I was a little bit muted. Okay, so I was thinking about safety, and while we were talking about this, I got to thinking about autonomous or self-driving vehicles. So I think that when we think about safety, sometimes we jump to the thought that kind of self-driving vehicles or autonomous vehicles are going to help with the safety problem. So that's one way of looking at it. But I just want to ask you in general, where do you see the future of that? Is it a safety solution, part of the safety solution, or is it just how our technology is changing, what we're doing, what we're driving? Do we need it? Does it work?
It's a tool in the toolbox. I'm immediate past chair of the board of ITS America, the Intelligent Transportation Society.
Of course you were. I don't
Yeah.
think there's a role you've not held.
And in that role, I learned a lot about autonomous, I call them connected and automated vehicles, because autonomous to me sounds just too Terminator, we are autonomous. We are coming to get you,
No.
I had a German friend in the ITS world, who somebody said you were 99.99% of the way to a self-driving car. He says, that's great. 99.99% of the way there. Suppose you want to climb Mount Everest. Fly to New Delhi. You're 99% of the way there. Kathmandu, you get off the airplane there, you're 99.9% of the way there. Get to the base camp, you're 99.99% of the way to the top of the mountain. All you got left to do is climb Mount Everest. So, it's approaching, it's going to happen at some point. There's the technical stuff, but I think what's more important than the technical stuff will be the socialization of it.
Mm-hmm.
If an automated vehicle is available for purchase today, could you insure it? Could you get a loan to buy it? It's a
great question.
Would you want to be in an automated vehicle driving the speed limit on the highway with all the people around you who aren't and won't? And on and on and on. But I do think the technology is making cars safer. I really appreciate the adaptive cruise control that I have now that I didn't have before. I appreciate the blind spot monitoring. I appreciate the backup mirror. There's cool stuff going on. NHTSA is doing things back to the safety space. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has developed a device that can be put in a car that makes it impossible to drive if you're intoxicated. Deploy that device. Let's do it.
Yeah, to me, that's those are the kind of interim technology measures that can go so far while we do perfect that. So before we, I guess, get into the lightning round and have some fun with that, what's the one thing out there that you wish citizens knew more about from a transportation planning perspective? Put that hat on just that specific side and your work there. And what's the big thing we miss?
The big thing we miss is how much of the fact that transportation is not an end unto itself. It's a means to an end. And, we need to be thinking about the nexus between transportation and land use and the environment. And a lot of people don't think about that. When they think about transportation, they think about it as transportation. They don't think about the fact that we've zoned our communities to force our children out. I don't think that's why we did it, but that's what's happening.
Yeah.
The people we've zoned out of our neighborhoods are our children. And so when they drive to qualify, they drive to qualify with the notion that there's an unlimited supply of cheap, congestion-free transportation access between the house I can afford and where I need to be to work. We need to be having that conversation. And a lot of times people have the housing conversation, they have the environmental conversation, they have the transportation. It's a bigger thing than that.
I just the other night, yeah, to your point on the zoning piece, I mean, we had I sit as a commissioner, and we had an item before us the other night where somebody who was testifying basically threw back at us sort of this, I'm going to say the nobility of the conditional use permit process, and sort of framed it that way.
There's an
And in my-
episode.
I know.
The nobility.
Nobility of the CUP.
And I sort of, I in my comments, I said, you want to know some truth about planning. The CUP clearly is one of the most nefarious tools that we have, and it still exists today because we still have this desire to keep our thumb on certain parts of development and want to have that ultimate say, and it can be incredibly subjective, as I think you're alluding to.
It's not where the easy money is, that's for sure.
Yeah.
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 I'd rather build a sprawling rancher in a greenfield subdivision than go into town and try something with a CUP. But look, like Spokane, Washington, 60% of the geography of Spokane, Washington is zoned single family housing.
Yeah.
26% of the families in Spokane, Washington can afford the median single family house in Spokane. So the community is effectively walled 60% of the community off from almost 75% of its population.
Yeah.
And the apartment vacancy rate is like 3%. And they're surprised to have a homeless problem. It's just, we need to be thinking about these things holistically.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question, Mr. Commissioner or Mr. Secretary. I'm going to call you Mr. Secretary because I don't know when the next chance that will be for us to have someone that we can refer to as Mr. or Miss Secretary. But I want to make sure the audience knows, I think you're probably pretty excited about your new role with AASHTO. So I'm curious, just if you can share that, what do you hope to achieve in the next year or so? And a little bit about what AASHTO, if for anybody who may not be familiar with who they are, what they do, and again, what you're trying to make happen there.
Yeah, AASHTO is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's the organization of the state DOTs. It's the 50 states plus the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. So the CEOs of all the DOTs are the board of directors of AASHTO. And every year they elect a member of the board to serve as president. I was vice president last year. And for 2022, 2023, from October 22 to November 23, I am the president of AASHTO. In that role, I get to set emphasis areas, and I get to make appointments to the various committees and councils of AASHTO, the chairs and vice chairs. And I get the bully pulpit of the presidency. But my emphasis area is a resilient DOT, the ability to plan for and respond to whatever comes at you. Because the unofficial motto of my agency is, you cannot make this stuff up. You just can't. We've had tumbleweed jams where a rural road in eastern Washington, a cut got just packed with tumbleweeds in a windstorm. It took a better part of a day to dig the cars out. You can't make this stuff up. So we need to be safe, we need to be smart, we need to be sound. And so we are having a national safety summit this year where the DOTs are all going to get together. We're going to bring in outside partners, and we're going to talk about what do we need to do. It's not, do we do this or that? Let's get it all out there. What do we do as infrastructure owners and operators? What do we ask our partners to do in enforcement and emergency services and licensing and the vehicles? So we're going to work on that. We're going to work on telling our asset management story better, and we're going to work on the relationship between land use and transportation. We've invited representatives of people on the land use side of things, the development community, the real estate community, AARP, Smart Growth America. We've invited those folks to come to the table and talk about how do we integrate land use and transportation investment in a way that optimizes that investment and serves the folks that we're responsible to as best we can. So those are the things on my plate in the coming year, and it's been well received. I just got back from Nerd Camp from TRB, and we did a CEO roundtable on my emphasis areas, and then my colleague, my good friend Sean Wilson, who's the Secretary of the Louisiana DOT, did a roundtable on the we call it the moonshot, but we got together and got funding for a conversation amongst the DOTs about what is the vision for transportation in the future. We really haven't had a national vision since the Eisenhower interstate system was envisioned. And we have developed a vision for community-oriented transportation. That's your DOTs, again, not your grandma's DOT. We're thinking about things differently, and I'm excited to have the year as president. And then I don't know if they'll put me out to pasture or what, but my buddy Craig Thompson, who is the Secretary of Wisconsin DOT, is the vice president. So he'll be vice president next year. He came to the DOT space from the Transportation Management Association space. So you know, it's an interesting world to work in, and we're looking forward to maybe leaving it a little better than I found it.
So Roger, you mentioned Nerd Camp, and we all know you went to TRB, and sometimes we have students, planning students, or less experienced planners listening in, and we love that. So we want to let them know what these things are that are available to them for their career development and things. So TRB, what does it stand for, and kind of what are some of your highlights? You told us a little bit about what you were involved with, but what were some things that you really would recommend if a student or a less experienced planner or engineer gets to go to TRB?
Sure.
What would you recommend?
TRB is the Transportation Research Board. It is a part of the National Academy of Sciences and Engineering. It is, again, there's an overall executive committee. There are lots of committees and councils, and it's transportation research, surprisingly. The big thing they do is have a national convening every year in January in Washington, D.C. There were over 11,000 people at TRB this week. And the networking opportunity is incredible. The opportunity for professional engagement in the committee structure is incredible. A lot of academics are engaged. So, you know, for students, your professors are probably a part of it. If you're a graduate student, you're probably a part of it. But yeah, but it is Nerd Camp. We just kind of,
it's like this, it's this moment where like your entire profession flashes before your eyes. Because I always go back to people I was in graduate school with, to consultants I barely interacted with in my early career, to, you know, other folks and things like that. It shows that despite it being 10,000, it's a pretty small world that's pulling the nerds together for something like that. So yeah, well, we're going to move into the lightning round, Roger. These would be some quick hitting things. They're probably not even going to relate to transportation. So you ready to go?
yeah, give it a shot.
All right. Favorite varietal of Washington apple?
Oh,
That's a good one.
Cosmic Crisp.
Ooh,
Oh.
Yes, those
That's
are
a new kid on the block,
Yeah.
isn't it? A little bit. That my kids love that one too.
worthy of it.
Yeah. You were in Germany, I think you said, in between, I think it was the Mercedes and the Porsche.
Mhm.
Okay, which one? What are you going with? You have to choose one, or you
Oh,
get to
Porsche.
choose one. Maybe that's the better one.
If I needed one, it'd be a Porsche for sure.
Oh, there you
Any
go.
particular model?
Nah, just something with a soft top.
All right.
A practical car for a mountain environment, right? Yeah.
Take that over any one of the passes
Yeah.
this time of year.
You're going to pick one concert to go to next week. You can go anywhere, living or dead. artists you want to see? Who are you going to see?
Oh boy, it would either be Springsteen or going back and seeing Jason Isbell in the 400 unit.
Ah,
Okay.
I got to see him at the Ryman back on my birthday back in
Yeah.
October, which was definitely a bucket list, especially it was the night he played with Amanda Shires. So
Yeah, I saw him up in Bellingham, and I saw Amanda Shires in a bar in Seattle. It was
wow.
the coolest concert. But I would love to see the 400 unit with Amanda Shires and, you know, the boss. That'd be great.
All right, here's a tough one. Pasco, Kennewick, or Richland?
Man, Richmond.
I think that Don is awake at night thinking of these things. He's like, I'm just going to get them.
Well, for those out there, that is the Tri-City area of
Yeah.
Washington. So, and he could have even said pass because I know it could have been a political choice.
Oh no, Richland's good. They're all good. They're all good places, believe me. But Richland, you have the chance to get a Richland Bombers, you know, T-shirt. You know,
Oh yeah.
the high school is the Bombers. They have a mushroom cloud logo.
that's a good one. We have well, you probably don't know our famous or infamous town with its high school mascot of Orofino.
Mhm.
And yes, and for those who don't know Orofino, Idaho, the story is that you know, the history is that there's a state mental hospital there. It's still in operation. And what is the high school namesake and mascot? The Maniacs.
Yep.
And is that affiliated? They will say no. Others tend to disagree. I don't know. My question for you is, as a skier, where's your top place? Where are you going to head off into the hills and do your best skiing?
Brundage Mountain, McCall, Idaho.
Oh, you're going to stay here in Idaho.
Perfect.
My house is 8 miles from the lift.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, can't beat that.
I've got a trick question for you. Which is the better engineering school, NC State or Virginia Tech?
Oh man. Graduates of Virginia both think that graduates of those schools make excellent employees.
I will say this, that all the years in working with NCDOT, the best engineer for the complete street side was a Hokie. So that's where I would go.
Oh man.
I'll tell you
We
the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life though was, well, I said it, but I went back to UNC Charlotte where I did my undergrad, and I was talking to the ASCE student chapter, and they said, I said, how many of you are here to do structural engineering? They all raised their hands. I go, how many of you are here to do transportation engineering? Two kids raised their hand, and I go, the rest of y'all gonna work for these guys at DOT.
So I've got one. I mean, if Montana Governor John Dutton called up and wanted you to be a secretary out there, would you go do a cameo on Yellowstone?
Oh man. I'm gonna do a cameo.
Wait, which hat would you wear? That's what I want to know.
Whichever one they handed me.
Have you had the opportunity to meet our National Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg?
I have.
Is he ever, and I'm going to fumble this, is he ever just not as eloquent as he comes across all times?
Not in my experience. He is the most eloquent. I mean, I wish I had his way with words and his quickness in the response. Brilliant, man.
Yeah.
Next
No
time you
doubt.
see him, will you ask him to please respond to my Instagram message? I have asked him to be on this podcast. I don't understand why he's not checking his messages.
I even put a Pete Buttigieg prayer candle in some of my presentations because I'm like, we've got a secretary who can pick a protected bike lane out of a lineup. We need to keep that guy and keep in good spirits with him.
That would be awesome.
I was just reading about the bio of our new House chair of the Transportation Committee, and it's different person, definitely going back to rural and trucking and that sort of thing. And that's another role that's necessary. But I think that many of us in the planning profession are enjoying the limelight that our industry is getting, largely due to Secretary Buttigieg. So it's been fun to see. So. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to call this episode wrapped up. King of the Hill, number 1. Boy, I can't tell you, and a rare breed. Secretary Millar, thank you so very much for joining us on the Planning Commission podcast. I know you've got all kinds of, I can't even imagine what your next meeting is, right? Like after this, immediately after this, it's got to be something unbelievable. But again, we thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today.
No, happy to do it. Thanks for what you do.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, with that, listeners, check out our new website, planningcommissionpodcast.com. Pretty straightforward. And all of our social media outlets, our past season number 1, all 21 episodes are there, and more about us and our bios and more than you probably care to know. Dawn's clogging background and Jess's handle on her ham radio, right? And all of those days. So anyway, commissioners, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, second.
All right, great. Thank you all. Appreciate it. We'll keep doing our thing, and we'll see you next time. Listener, hey, listener, that's you. Would you like more content? Well, if you would, check out our YouTube page. Watch us there. Go to our Facebook page. Like us there. We do live episodes about every couple weeks, and all of our episodes are available on both of those platforms, in addition to Apple, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places where you get your podcasts. Tell us what you think. What about some guests or organizations that you think we should interview? We're game. Let us know. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. And we'll try to keep up the good work. Now get back to your packet.